The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the host of the show is Michael Duca, and he's here. Michael.
Hey, Ralph. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm good. We could have had a show and just what we talked about off the air. I could have pressed buttons, and it would have been just as good as the one we have coming up. But I'd like to draw from our conversation and bring it into the show. First of all, the news of the day is Derek Jeter and the Miami Marlins. Now, what you say, Derek Jeter, the Giants? What? How does that? What? Michael, tell us about impending deals, impending craziness, as it regards to the San Francisco Giants.
Well, as my good friend Henry Schulman calls it, we're on the Stantotani watch.
All right.
And honestly, I think Ohtani is going to drop before Stanton does. And I think that decision will probably be made certainly before the weekend is over and maybe before the weekend starts. We may know by Friday.
Are scouts saying that he is actually as good a pitcher as he is a hitter and vice versa?
Well, all you can do is judge him on what he's done. And what he's done is throw 100 miles an hour with a 2.5 ERA. That's pretty good.
Yes. And an accomplished hitter for sure. And
a very accomplished hitter. Yeah, and he's 23 years old.
Wow. I'm drooling over either or both of them individually. They're both obviously superstars or superstars in the making, and in Ohtani's case. But is there a possibility, perhaps an outside chance, of both of them being in San Francisco, or that's an absolute pipe dream?
An outside chance, but I would not want to bet my children's future on it. I worked at the Giants Children's Christmas Party last night. It's an annual for me. This is the 13th time I've done it, and I ran into a well-known member of the local Bay Area media, and we were talking about both of these guys. And he basically said he thinks that Ohtani, it would be wisest for him, the best choice for him to make would be to go to San Diego, to go to a place where, it doesn't really matter if it takes him a year or two to adjust to Major League pitching.
Could you say the same about Seattle for him?
No, Seattle's really trying to build themselves as a contender right now. There's a whole raft of things that we do know and don't know about this situation. But what I thought was interesting was that Alex Pavlovich said, why wouldn't he come to San Francisco where they've already proven that they can integrate a good hitting pitcher into the lineup? They've used him as a DH in the American League. And he said, yeah, but, he needs to have the ability to just hit 210 for a year. And I said, gosh, the Giants had 7 guys in left field who did that last year. Why would this be any different? At least there's some potential here. And he said, well, and that is the proper answer to that point.
Well, does this seem like enough upside when you're talking about the slow adjustment to are you being overly cautious or realistic or pragmatic? If you're going to put all that money, if this guy's worth so much with the bidding, do you expect more than that? Would you, if you
well,
find him?
Here's what This is like a nightclub show. There's a $20 million cover charge, and the good news is if you don't like the show, you get your $20 million back here. If you don't get him, you don't pay the posting fee.
Oh, okay.
And so the posting fee only goes to the Japanese team if he decides on a team within 21 days, and then it's only paid by the team that decides on him. That's the new system. So it's a $20 million entry fee to get the guy. The Giants can only pay him $300,000 in bonus money, and he gets the major league minimum. And he's under team control. He comes in just like any other rookie. He's under team control for 6 years.
Oh, he's not getting big bucks up. He's not getting big.
No, that's the whole point.
It's the team that owns him in Japan that's really going to get the big bucks.
The fighters will get the $20 million posting fee. However, here's the thing to understand about this and why it makes all of this a little more difficult to handicap. Coming out this year instead of next year, he gave up about $200 million. Because if he had come out next year, he would have been a free agent, not subject to the posting system, and not subject to the international draft and sign rules. He would have just been a free agent, just, like any other free agent, and he would have commanded at least $200 million on the open market. And he knows that. And he intentionally walked away from that.
What was his thinking other than I'm exposing myself for another year of professional ball, and will my stats hold up? Could that be?
No. His thinking is very simple, and it's really admirable. He doesn't care about the money. He wants to compete at the highest level, and he wants himself to do the best he can. The more years he plays as a semi-two, see, he was only a partial two-way player in Japan. Last year he was only a pitcher in DH. He didn't play in the outfield. He played in the outfield before. And he understands that if he's not willing to automatically limit himself to only half the teams in the major leagues, he needs to be able to get out there and play in the field. And if Japan is going to use him for another year as a DH, that dramatically decreases the ability to sell teams on the fact that he can go out and play outfield at the major league level.
Good point. So he's not as well developed as a ball player as you might think for a guy that's going to command big bucks, even if the big bucks don't go to him.
Well, you know who else wasn't as well developed as a ball player for a guy who's going to command big bucks? 17-year-old Bryce Harper. It turned out okay.
Yeah,
turns out you can project hitters who can hit, especially when they're hitting at the highest level already that's available to them.
That's very true. And then comes in the strategy of when to bring him up, because you've got those years where he's under contract, but you don't have to put him on the 40-man roster until...
Oh, yeah, you do. You do. You absolutely do. You have to guarantee him that as... Remember, he gets to pick where he's going.
Right.
You're not going to be... It's just not going to work to dangle something in there. I mean, first of all, without getting...
Well, is he going to want big league status right away?
Of course.
Oh, okay. So then you are bringing up the...
He has big league status now in Japan. Why wouldn't he want big league status to move to MLB? I mean...
he said he's not in it for the money, and he's in it for the development, and because if he's going to... No.
You're using words I didn't use. I didn't say he's in for the development. He's in for the challenge and the competition. And the challenge and the competition are at the major league level.
If he's going to come to a National League team and play defense, has to play defense, and he's interested in excelling, he himself would probably tell you that he's not ready to play defense in the big leagues. Hitting not much.
Well, he might do that, Ralph. He might well do that. But there's 36 to 38 games available in spring training. There's backlot games. There's B games. There's minor league games in camp. You've got some winter ball available to you. I mean, if he signs with the Giants at the winter meetings, he can have 50 games in the outfield before opening day. That's enough.
Okay. Well,
and by the way, just a quiet reminder: the Giants do have in their stable the greatest teacher of outfield in the history of the game.
does he still go to spring training and go out there?
Sure does. I don't know about going out there, but he goes to spring training, and Willie doesn't have to see you play to tell you how you should. There's a right way to play the outfield, and Willie defined it, and he knows it better than anybody.
Okay.
Let me ask you one quick question.
Yeah.
You remember Barry Bonds in Pittsburgh?
With Andy Van Slyke and Sid Thrift.
Yeah, well, do you remember him with Sid Bream?
Sid Bream, was he who, did he slud? Did he not slide? That was somebody else.
Did he not keep the Pirates out of the World Series on a ball hit to medium shallow left field that Barry Bonds could not throw him out trying to score from second base? See, there was a reason that Barry Bonds had a reputation for having a rag arm when he came to San Francisco, and it took Willie one conversation to explain to Barry, so your arm's weak. Therefore, you need to develop a quick release. You can't make your arm stronger, but you can make your release faster. You can work on your footwork. And what happened? Bonds won Gold Glove in left field because of a couple of conversations with Willie. Willie didn't get out there and show him how to do it. He's not left-handed.
Right. Wow. Very interesting. He has that ability to communicate that quickly, to communicate.
He does, and he has a couple of other things. He has the charisma, and he has the standing. If I went up to Shohei Ohtani and told him, that you need to be on the balls of your feet and trying to figure out or learn as a pitcher anyway how you're going to pitch to this guy so that you can be leaning the right way and get a better break on balls in the outfield, he would not politely say, of course. If Willie Mays tells him that, he's going to go out and live and eat and drink and breathe that for the rest of his career.
Right.
It's Willie Mays.
Last week you mentioned the name Larry Herndon, and I remember Mays going out there in the outfield and making a center fielder, and a damn good one, out of Larry Herndon. So he comes to mind in that manner. So, yeah, of course, that the name. It's like if Ted Williams were teaching you hitting. You could look at it that way.
Yeah. And you should look at it that way. So that's kind of the Ohtani side of it. Stanton, as you and I discussed off the air, I think it's less likely that the Giants will get Stanton, even though a lot of people, my highly skeptical and cynical friend Tim Kamakali included, think that the odds are about 50-50 right now. I mean, if he's forced to choose between the Cardinals and the Giants, I think he comes to the Giants. I think there's just, I think he likes the idea of playing in the Bay Area and the idea of playing at this park where he hits like a wild man.
You mentioned Jeter puts in place deals with both the Giants and the Cardinals. And what if the kid Stan says, I'll sign with either of them?
Well,
what does Jeter do? How does that establish his
what
his
does Jeter
way
do?
negotiate? He's
choice.
now like a general manager. Now he's got to deal with these individuals for the rest of his executive career. Is he going to look like an absolute jerk at this point?
Why is that his problem? Nobody made the Marlins sign him to a $300 million deal. They offered it. He accepted it.
Right.
And that's kind of how contracts work. Once you sign them, you don't get to have buyer's remorse anymore. You sign the contract. So you ask me, what's Jeter going to do if Stanton says he doesn't want to be traded? He's not going to trade him. I guess his choice will be.
No. What if he wants to be? What if he says it's okay to trade me to either St. Louis or San Francisco? There are deals supposedly in place by Jeter with both teams.
No, he can't do that. He cannot do that. He has a trade
is the
provision
rumor
in
that
his
there's
contract.
a deal in place with just the Giants? Does that stand true?
No, there is a deal, the framework of a deal, basically everything about a deal with some contingencies included, has been reached with both teams. And now Stanton has the option of selecting one or the other or neither. And right now, he's on the neither track. Right now, he wants to be a Dodger. And which personally I think is a mistake. I think he'd be better off with the Cardinals than as a Dodger, and I think he'd be best off with the Giants.
Is Miami negotiating with the Dodgers? Are they talking?
Well, not openly. Not openly. The Dodgers are saying the Dodgers are very reluctant because the Dodgers are just getting over a really bad case of Carl Crawford.
Oh yes. Yes, the Reds
and Andre Ethier, and the Dodgers were sitting there on almost a $250 million payroll, which everybody thought was okay. It was going to be just fine because they were going to cruise to the World Series championship this year, and then they didn't. And their ownership group, while it has all the money in the world. And all the money in the world coming from a cable franchise, Time Warner, that's kind of an iffy thing too. You have to look at that and say, geez, if things are getting tight at ESPN, and we've got this cable deal signed with a company whose programming isn't available to our fans, and they won't allow the Dodgers to be on any other platform except their own.
Vince Scully doesn't get to be heard by the majority of Dodger fans in his last year.
That's one of the things that happened, and it's just
disgraceful.
And so the Dodgers are a little bit touchy about spending money right now. They do not seem to be real positive about throwing a $25 to $30 million a year liability under the books. Now, I can understand that. Because they're looking at their team and they're thinking it's not going to be very far down the road. We don't have Kershaw signed forever. We only have him signed for a couple more years, I think.
Right. He's going to really demand money.
And we let's see, we've got Bellinger is going to come up for arbitration in another 2 years. And Seager comes up for arbitration in 1 year, and it's going to cost a lot of money to keep this team together. And if we throw 10 years of, $25 million on top of that, well, now it's tricky.
Michael, isn't it interesting that the Dodgers lose the World Series in a year of the home run, beaten by Altuve and little ball, baseball, old-fashioned ball? I thought that was quite interesting, especially in that seventh game.
Well, it was, but don't forget that Altuve led the Astros in home runs in the postseason. I mean, that's little guy, but not little ball.
That's true. That's true. But they did do little things. They got runners over, and that was a great last game. And I have to say, it's difficult for me as a Mets fan to root. First of all, as a New York Giant fan, it's difficult to root for the Dodgers. As a San Francisco apologist, difficult for me to root for the Dodgers, and it's difficult as a Met fan to root for Houston. But they got me behind them a little bit towards the end, towards the last 5 minutes. How about that?
Well, I found it easier, and as an ex-Mets fan, you should have found it easier to root for the Astros because they have Giants orange colors. They're orange and black.
That's true. That's very true.
They're orange and very, very, very dark blue.
Oh, there's a lot of things, but main thing, they are based in Texas, and my basic overall respect for the state of Texas for a number of reasons is not all that high.
I understand all of that. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time in Texas, and I understand that. But you have to remember, players don't, in general, Giancarlo Stanton notwithstanding, they don't get to pick where they play.
That's
for the most
true.
part.
That's true. For the most, they're thrown in, and they could care less. They're happy because there's no taxes in Texas. That was easy to say. That flowed a little bit. No taxes in Texas. So they're happy playing there. And ball players and humans aren't really, for the most part, as we talked about off air, they're not too concerned with the social condition outside of their own little realm of comfort. Either their paychecks or, as I say, taxes and this and that. And that's probably their people's failure to get out to vote, that kind of thing, is probably responsible for where we are right now as a nation, as a country.
Well, I think we can certainly make a case for the fact that a higher turnout have produced different outcomes. I'm not sure that this is the time or place to get into what those outcomes might have been or why they might have been better or worse. But I think everybody can agree that at the very least, the size of the turnout had an effect on the results.
Yeah. And as it's turning out, moral corruption is apolitical. So.
Oh, yeah.
And one man's Democrat is another man's Republican. We talked about that a little bit off the air. But let's get back to am I correct? Right and left.
Right and left. And
let's talk about something that's dear to your heart. And I have some basic curiosities. You co-wrote a book. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm someone who, when I read a book, it's a major accomplishment. So it's, you can imagine how in awe I am of you that you have your name in the Library of Congress. Just putting it that, if nothing else, I'm one who grew up appreciating that. Tell me, it's hard enough to write a book, co-writing a book. How did you guys go about it? How did it start? How did you come to the project? Tell me a little bit about it, just to satisfy my curiosity.
Well, it went something like this. we were sitting in the press box at AT&T. My co-author, Jason Turbow, was at that time the editor of the Giants Today page in the Chronicle, which was Giants Today was an interesting deal. When the new ballpark opened, the Chronicle signed a 5-year deal with the Giants that they would be the official newspaper of the Giants, and the paper for 5 years is actually available in newspaper boxes at the ballpark. And in return for that, there would be a 1-page segment of the sports section called Giants Today that was not produced by the sports editorial department. It was going to be produced by the marketing department. And Jason,
did it have a little thing called advertise? A little word.
No, it was not an advertorial. It was not an advertorial. What it was, there was it's 5-column page. There was a left column and a right column that were standardized depending on where you were within a series. If a new series was starting tomorrow, then there might be a piece on one side that's a look ahead to the next team, and a piece on the other side that was Mike Kruko's keys to the series, something like that.
Okay.
And then in the center 3 columns was sufficient space to do a 1,500-word feature. And that's what that was about. Subsequently to getting involved together on the book, I joined that staff, and I produced about 100 pieces for Giants Today in its last 2 years of existence. And none of them were advertorials. I did a piece with Scott Ayer on his ADHD that we wound up producing 5,000 reprints of, and Scott used it as a handout when he would go talk to local schools. By the way, not all ball players are completely oblivious to the social condition around them.
Most millionaires are, though, and ball players are pretty much becoming millionaires early on, and it changes. I have to say, in my experience in knowing folks, the ones that, or knowing even about folks, the ones that make enough money, FU money, or whatever you want to call it, sadly, they acquiesce to what they've become. That's just my...
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I at the same time, I'm here to tell you that guys who come from less than advantaged backgrounds and suddenly wake up one morning and find that they're making $650,000 in a year, wow, does their circle of friends expand fast.
Yes. Yes. Everybody likes them.
Everybody says, hey, remember, when I held your books for you at your locker?
Yeah, I'm sorry I hadn't kept up with you in the 25 years since, but, you didn't make $1 million in those years. I didn't really need you.
Yeah, so, I think in some ways that sword cuts both ways, but let us get back to the story. So,
all right.
So, we were just sitting around after a game one night talking about, I said, there's a subject that has not been touched. And Jason said, what is it? And I said, well, think about how many times you've listened to a baseball broadcast on the radio, and something happens out on the field and you hear the announcers say, oh, well, that's going to have repercussions later on. Boy, he shouldn't have. And there's a ground ball to third, and we'll be back after these words. And that's it. It's gone. They would hint at the unwritten rules, but nobody ever said, here's what they all are, and here's why they matter.
Well, the one that, when you talk about the one that comes to mind, the unwritten rule, you don't bunt. If you're winning by X number, you don't steal bases, you don't bunt. you basically give up your offense if you're ahead by X number of runs. And I can think back to all the comebacks in history. Is that one of the unwritten rules, is that you let up on your offense when you're ahead?
The first unwritten rule that we discuss with everybody is you don't steal bases late with a big lead. And everybody agrees with that rule. The discussion points come under, you remember famously somebody once said it all depends on what your definition of is.
Mr. Clinton?
Yes. Well, it all depends on your definition of late and big lead. And by the way, those things change over time, and they change geographically. Late with a big lead simply does not exist in Coors Field. It just doesn't exist.
True.
It barely
doesn't
exists.
And depending on the team you're playing's bullpen, how beat up they are, you could say it's any time it does it. There's no guarantee.
And one of the things that we learned from people in doing the book was that there's an old school way of looking at bullpens and a new school way of looking at bullpens. Sparky Anderson said, as far as I'm concerned, I shut down the running game when we have a 4-run lead at any point in the game, because if I can't hold a 4-run lead with my bullpen, I don't deserve to win the game. Now, admittedly, that's old school, but it's there. There were scads of rules that people came up with that we just had never really chewed on or thought of that much. There's one about, you see a batter come up from the on-deck circle, and he'll walk around behind the umpire and say hello to him, and he'll tap the catcher on the shin and step into the batter's box, right?
Right.
Turns out there's an unwritten rule about that. You don't walk between the pitcher and catcher. And guys named Drysdale and Gibson used to enforce that. And anyway, before we get into what's in the book, you asked about the process of doing the book. I really
what's
want
in
to
the book is fascinating. No question. What's in the book is fascinating. Let's have a little commercial for the book. Where can the book be gotten? I'm sure it's on Amazon.
Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble. It's on, you can get it as a Kindle. And honestly, we don't care where you buy it. As long as you buy it new, we get some money from it. If you buy it used, we don't. And even that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, you can go to the library and check it out and read it if that's the way you need to do it. We're fine with that. We've done well with the book. We've sold over 80,000 copies. So, we're not at the point, it's one of the best-selling baseball books of the last decade. And I am proud to tell you, Ralph, that the book, and you said you've read it, correct?
Absolutely.
I'm proud to tell you that the book is actually being used as a college textbook.
We talked about that, and it's, in my opinion, up there with Charles Einstein's book, On the Giants' Willie's Time, just from the standpoint of a sociological.
Well, that's some pretty amazing praise. Yeah, I mean, I got to give you the truth. 10 years after writing the book, I get goosebumps if somebody says something like that. I will never consider myself to be capable of carrying Charlie Einstein's typewriter ribbon.
You're too modest. I don't know how he was as a communicator, but I'm sure he couldn't hold your telephone cord. How about that?
Well,
communicator.
I don't know. We'll see about that. So the process of the book was that, we just kind of looked at each other and said, you're right. Nobody has ever really dived into this subject. So we kind of started playing around. We didn't really know what we were doing. We really didn't. We were just kind of collecting some information and working on some ideas, and we had sort of this. Jason happened to know Jack McDowell, and so we get a meeting with Jack McDowell for an hour and a half at Lefty O'Doul's.
Wow, nice.
And we spent that hour and a half talking about what wound up being our sample chapter and our lead chapter in the book, which is the true story behind the most famous baseball in history. And that is Nolan Ryan and Robin Ventura.
Right.
Including why, yes.
What precipitated it?
What precipitated it had occurred 2 years earlier. And that's why it's a great introduction to the unwritten rules, because the unwritten rules, basically, Bob Brenly explained them perfectly. The unwritten rules are all about respect. Respect for your opponent, respect for the game. So, and respect for your teammates.
Right.
So this was a situation. It was the White Sox. It was the Rangers. It was Nolan Ryan at the end of his career. I will not tell you where I have seen this or how I saw it, but I have held Nolan Ryan's pitching glove, put it on my own left hand, and looked down and seen the bent and sharpened cronut on the bottom that was used to mark baseballs.
Whoa.
Apparently 100 miles an hour at 43 wasn't enough. Which led to yet another chapter in the book, If You Ain't Cheating, You Ain't Trying. We've talked about that before.
Right.
But bottom line was, 2 years ago.
Wow.
2 years
well, you
ago,
had it on your hand. And
I looked
you must have been in the dugout, and he left it in there.
No, this was after he had retired. I would never, ever, ever touch a player's glove. Ever. That should be a written rule. Even other players. Ask Ruben Rivera what that does to your career.
Whoa. Yeah.
So, this was
Didn't he sell Jeter's glove, as a matter of fact?
He stole Jeter's glove.
Stole it and sold it on eBay.
Yeah, and Jeter's probably going to want some of that money back to help pay Stanton now. Anyway, we keep diverting ourselves from the topic at hand here. So the subject matter was. Do you remember the name?
I think it's
Craig Grebeck.
Yes.
Remember Craig Grebeck?
Little infielder with the White Sox, the shortstop.
Yes.
Pretty good ball player.
Well, it turns out that Craig Grebeck and Ozzie Guillen went back-to-back off Ryan. It was the only time they went back-to-back in their careers.
And this is and Ryan with his pride, you could just imagine.
And Ryan had a grudge against the White Sox because of that, first of all. Then you had this situation where the Rangers, over a 2-year period after that back-to-back game, I believe either 4 or 5 times came from as many as 7 runs behind late in the game to win.
Oh, wow.
And the night before...
What drives guys? It's amazing.
The night before the fight, the White Sox, with a 5 or 6 run lead in the 8th inning, stole a couple of bases. And they were asked about it after the game. They said, don't you think, you were up 6 runs, don't you think? And they said, look at how many times the Rangers have come from that far behind to beat us in the last 2 years. If they promise to stop scoring late, we promise to stop running.
Right. It comes full circle to what you're talking. When is enough offense enough? That's just it's a philosophical question.
So this leads to a team meeting for the White Sox before the Ryan game. And McDowell told us all about the team meeting, and then we went and called Craig Grebeck, who was coaching at a junior college in Southern California at the time, and talked to him about it. And we got pretty much agreement on what went on there. One of the things that went on there was that there was an agreement that Ryan was probably going to throw at somebody. He had a history of throwing at people anyway. Famously, Nolan Ryan leaned over to a teammate after, you remember the playoff game with the Phillies where Lenny Dykstra got the big hit in the 9th inning and was clapping all the way down to first base and kind of clowning it up at first base as they had tied the game. And Nolan Ryan leaned over to, I can't remember who to, and just said, no, it was that they were on the bench, and he wasn't pitching in the game. He just leaned over and kind of nodded towards Dykstra and said, that boy needs a bow tie. Which is Satchel Paige's old term for I'm fixing to throw it at your throat.
Right. What did he say, Satchel Paige? A melon to your lemon, and a pea to your knee. That was Satchel Paige's expression. He'd throw up at you and low at you, but he'd throw at you and keep you off the plate, and then he had his way with you. That was as simple as that. Drysdale was that way.
Oh, I got Drysdale stories coming out my ears, but leave us. Once again, I'm going to return us back on track here.
Okay, please.
So the deal came down to whoever got thrown at or hit by Ryan had to go out after him. Now, mind you, at this point in his career, nobody had charged the mound on Nolan Ryan. Nobody had offered to fight Nolan Ryan in, I think, 14 years. The last guy to have done it was Dave Winfield.
Whoa.
And
how did you find that out, just out of curiosity? That's an incredible stat.
Well, there's an amazing amount of stuff available to you if you're working with somebody who works for a newspaper. The LexisNexis database of newspaper stories is pretty amazing. It's pretty expensive if you have to subscribe to it to do your research, but if you have access to it, boy howdy, there's some stuff in there. One of the things that we got out of that was possibly the best sports headline in history after the fight. The day after the fight, the Austin Statesman American puts the headline on its story of Ventura gets 5 straight hits off Ryan.
Okay. And you can imagine what's going on in his head. You just have to know with an ego like that'll stick with him for the rest of his life.
And here's the deal. This was old Nolan Ryan. This was end of career vintage Nolan Ryan. This was a Nolan Ryan who, when he was finished warming up, would walk towards home plate, get to the cutout between the grass and the dirt, and stomp on it all the way around while giving the stank eye to the opposing dugout. And the message was crystal clear. Don't you fucking dare bunt on me.
Right.
It was crystal clear. Everybody understood it. and nobody did it. It was, nah, I think I'd rather keep my hearing in my left ear.
So Ventura goes out there and he got creamed.
Ventura goes out there and he gets hit. He gets hit with a pitch, and he's trotting toward. He thinks nothing of it, and he's trotting towards first base. And you watch the video, and this will be crystal clear to you. He gets halfway down the line, and he realizes, oh crap, I got to go after it. He doesn't go straight out to the mound. He runs halfway to first base, and then makes a sharp left turn. Now, what's the?
Well, that could be a way of so the umpire doesn't grab him.
No. He admitted afterwards he forgot. So
he wasn't all that mad.
So, it wasn't personal with him.
Yeah.
But it had to become personal with him because that's part of respecting your teammates, right? And so, what's the first thing, if you can close your eyes and envision the video, what's the first thing that Robin Ventura does when he makes that left turn and starts running after Ryan? It's the very first thing that he does.
Kind of puts his head down.
It's a critical mistake that he does. Critical.
Is that it?
He discards his helmet.
Oh, yes.
He took his helmet off and threw it away behind him as he went after Ryan, which not only reduced his momentum going forward, but it removed his protection. Ryan, having studied a little bit of history, understood instinctively that it's easier to defend the high ground, so he didn't come down and meet him like a lot of these guys do. He stayed up on top. So Ventura's height advantage is nullified. And as he's leaning forward and trying to climb the hill.
Michael, that's very clever, by the way. It's easier to defend the high ground. That's very, very well put. And if you look at history, it's really true.
Ralph, I'm a Sicilian, and I've been to Sicily.
And a wordsmith.
And it doesn't take you very long in Sicily to realize that all the cities are built on top of the mountains, literally at the very top. And it was for two reasons. It kept the arable land for farming.
Right.
And it was, if you live on top of a mountain and you build a wall around the outside of your city, it's pretty tough to get in there.
Yeah, you can see people coming.
You can see people coming, and you're already on top, and they're huffing and puffing. And
right.
So Ventura gets to the top, and the first thing Ryan does is just sort of reach out and get him in a headlock and start, the Noogie Festival. and that's the story. And that's the story behind it. So that was our sample chapter, and we had that kind of in hand, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing at that point. We were kind of lost. And I come to the ballpark one night, and there's a guy sitting next to me, and he's got on a daily credential, and it says, oh crap, I can't remember for sure if it was Harcourt Brace, but it had his name, Craig Wolf, and a major book publisher's name. And at some point in the evening, he comes up and introduces himself, and he says, hi, my name is Craig Wolf, and I'm out here for a few days from New York, and I'm writing a book, and I was wondering if you might be able to tell me what's the best way to connect with Willie Mays. Okay, I'm doing a biography of Willie, and what's the best way to connect with him? And I looked at him and I said, well, you've got the credential. So the team has approved you. That's about as much as they can do for you. And after that, you're on your own. I said, I warned Craig at the time. I told him, I said, if you want to do a biography of Willie, there better be something in it for Willie. And as it turned out, Willie wouldn't talk to him without money. And the book project eventually died, and a whole separate book on Willie came out. But separate from that, I got to know Craig. Craig's an interesting guy. He worked for the New York Times. He taught journalism at NYU and had a Pulitzer Prize under his belt.
Is that all he did?
That's all he'd done. He was the lead writer on the Amadou Diallo story. Remember the immigrant who reached into his pocket to pull out his wallet and show his ID and got shot 45 times by New York PD. He was the lead reporter on that entire story, and his entire team won a Pulitzer for the reporting on that. He also had written a book on I'm blanking on the kid's name, Casey, the golfer who wound up being allowed to use a golf cart.
Yes, mangled leg. He's got poor circulation. Yeah. He's out here on the West Coast, as a matter of fact. I cannot think of his name. That was a beautiful book.
Yeah.
And I think there was a documentary, a television documentary.
Yeah, I think ESPN did a 30 for 30 on him.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just said, well, look, if you're doing this book, you must, maybe you can make us smart about this. And he said, let me see the sample chapter. And he read the chapter, and he came back the next day, and he said, I have called my agent and told her that she needs to accept you guys, that this book needs to be out. If this is the sample chapter, this book needs to be out. He said, wow. This is absolutely riveting stuff. And I said, well, that's very kind of you. And so thus we found Christy Fletcher, with whom I worked and whom I accepted despite the fact that she's a graduate of the University of Southern California.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm a Cal guy. What can I say?
Yes, you're a compromiser at heart.
And she had done numerous really, really good books, including The Nanny Diaries, which was a huge bestseller and turned into a movie, and The Pianist. So, I mean, there are a number of books that she had done. So she said, well, you need to do a proposal. And I'm not going to take this to any publishers until you have given me a proposal that I feel I can sell. Well, the proposal, as it turns out, Ralph, includes a sample chapter, which was largely written. We tweaked it a little bit. But it also, you have to explain why you're the right people to write this book, what your access is to the information, what the competing books are in the marketplace, how big the market is, complete market analysis. I mean, you have to do it's a lot of work.
Well, from the first standpoint, you've got the access. You are the official scorer of the Giants. You're in the press book. You have a wealth of love. Your wife works for the organization. You have field access. That's no problem.
Well,
right?
keep in mind that this was in 2005, 6, and 7 that much of this was going on, or maybe 6, 7, and 8. I'm kind of blanking on it right now. But not all of those things were necessarily true at that time, but there was enough. The simple fact that we were in a two-team market, which meant that we had access to everybody who was active in baseball, including coaching staffs, which were a gold mine for us. And so what actually wound up happening is that I took on writing the proposal, and Jason took on writing the sample chapter. And I turned in proposal after proposal after proposal. And it took us nearly 2 years to get Christy happy. When she finally said, this is it, I can take this out. It was a Thursday afternoon that she said, I can do this. She said, I will start on Monday. We got our first offer on Wednesday and our best offer on Thursday. So she knew exactly what she was talking about. With a proper proposal, she said, I know I can sell this in a couple of days. And she did. We got a proposal from Wiley, who had just contracted with Michael Urban to do his book, The Three Aces. And then we got an even better deal with our current publishers, who are a branch of Random House, Albert Knopf and Company, which is the premium imprint. And it's very rare for Knopf to do a sports book. So that boded well in a whole variety of ways. We got to work. They gave us a nice pot of money. They said you can have half of it now and half of it when you turn in the manuscript. And that helped finance us for 2.5 years of research, including a trip to New York to try and go to the Yankee Old Timers game, and a trip to Cooperstown to spend a week in the library there and in the research materials. And as it turned out, again, we really weren't very smart about how these things work. And Jason was very, very concerned that they had purchased a proposal based on a sample chapter, and that therefore the entire book had to kind of mirror that voice and that writing style. And he said, since I wrote that, I guess I have to write all of it. And I said, well, I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, but if that's what floats your boat, that's fine. I went out and did probably 60% of the interviews, maybe 65%, transcribed most of them, produced, I don't know, did like 200 interviews. I think I produced and transcribed about 275 hours of sound. And Jason took on...
I could only imagine what that must be like, doing basically the same interviews, others interviewing on this network, transcribing them, editing them. That would be monumental. That's a tremendous undertaking.
Well, and to me, that was just a thing. That was a hill to be climbed. And sure, it was a big hill, but it was a hill to be climbed. What I couldn't fathom doing was sorting through all of that data to say, here, this quote, this section applies to this bucket over here on not running with a big lead late, and this bucket over here applies to not stepping on the pitcher's mound, and this bucket over here applies to deeks and phantom tags. And Jason took on that rather monumental task in my mind. In addition to the interviews, we read about 150 books and excerpted them or took quotes from them, and those all had to be tracked properly so that they could be properly attributed. A book like this spends a good deal of time with the publisher's lawyers. They make sure that what you're saying is, not going to get anybody's ire up. It's not going to wind you up in court. And if they wanted to know, did somebody really say this, or is this really what happened, then we would send them, the original sound from the interview. Obviously, I kept everything. So that was what the process was like. Jason did basically all of the original writing. I did all of the fact-checking, all of the line edits, meaning I went through the entire manuscript for grammar, for spelling, for, agreement, singulars and plurals, for cases.
Michael, how do you write? Do you wake up in the morning and write when the spirit moves you? Do you write like from 8 to 12? I'm going to be at that typewriter. I'm going to be at that computer, this, that, and the other thing.
Everybody has their own way. I have numerous friends who are writers and who do books, and some are of the opinion that you set yourself a budget and you sit down and you write 2,000 words each day. And others are of the opinion that when the muse strikes, you take advantage of it, you ignore the clock, and you write to exhaustion. But everybody says that, a lot of it has to do with the editing and the rewriting, and that, Jason did all the original writing, and I did the vast bulk of the editing before we sent it in. And then once we sent it in, our editor viewed it with the jaundiced eye of an editor and would tell us things like, you can do better than this, or this is a weak ending, or, transition this better. He didn't make actual edits. He kind of gave commands on what needed to be done. And so Jason would work on that, and I would once again do the line edits. I did all the fact-checking. That was also very important. And cross-checking, saying, well, we said this about this guy here, but we said this about him over here. We need to reconcile that.
Could either of you done the project without each other?
Well, I think Jason probably could have done the project without me, except for one very important factor, or I would say two very important factors. And one of them we found out after the book was published, which is that on a nonfiction book, the editors really don't give a crap about the writing. Well, not from a point of view. Obviously, they care about the writing, but my point is, they don't buy a book or not buy a book based on the quality of the sample chapter. For fiction, they do. But for nonfiction, they buy a book or don't buy a book based on the marketability of the idea.
Okay.
And it turns out they thought that my idea was highly marketable, and they were highly correct. The publisher predicted that this book would sell 20 to 25,000 copies. They remain stunned that it's still, the book came out in 2010. It's been out for close to 8 years now, and it's still on the active list of published books. You still find it in bookstores. I found it. I saw it in a bookstore in the Phoenix airport, a Hudson News stand at the Phoenix airport just last year.
That's got to be a thrill. You're walking down.
It is. It
absolutely.
is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And, of course, one of the things that I learned a long time ago is if you walk into a bookstore and you grab your book and you walk up to the front desk and you open it to the page with your picture in it and you put your smiling mug right above it, say, would you like them autographed? They immediately say, oh, absolutely, we'd love to. We'll put a sticker on it. We'll put it right up here by the cash register. And those books can't be returned. Once they're autographed, the bookstore has to keep them.
Boy, you should be at Books Inc. right now in Alameda.
Well, we did a reading there a number of years ago.
You should do another one. Nick is gone. Nick went back east, and talk to Jerry, and let's get it going. Because the stuff in the book is timeless. You could do a reading every year for the rest of your life, if you think about it that way. And
well, this is true.
Yeah. So that would be fun to do a show from the reading of the book at with a little audience.
So now you know what the process is like.
All right, let me ask you this: Did you not put? Is there anything looking back that you didn't put in the book that you wish you had, and is there anything that you wish you didn't put in the book?
There's nothing we wish we didn't put in the book. Here's what's interesting: when you sign a contract, there's a pretty specific set of things that the sides agree to do. We agreed to provide them with an 80,000-word manuscript. Boy, did we ever. We turned in 256,000 words.
Oh, whoa.
They reeled. They reeled. It took them like 3 days to even respond, and they said, we're going to have to cut some of this. We said, yeah, we know. We just, it's hard to choose amongst your children, so we figured we'd let you do it.
Okay. That's
And what wound up happening is that our 80,000 word manuscript wound up being published as a 120,000 word book.
Whoa.
Which to me was the first good sign. I said, this will sell, because even the editors and the publisher couldn't limit it to the size they thought they wanted.
Was there talk of maybe making 2 books?
There hasn't been. One of the things that happens, as you know, when you do a book, you have to, it's all about brand promotion now, and you have to promote everything yourself on social media. And unfortunately, at exactly the time that this came out and that we started a Facebook page that we were going to do a blog about the book, and in fact, the blog continues today. Jason still posts whenever there's something important regarding the unwritten rules. Another instance, he will post and bring it back around to the book and quote some stuff. And we've used a lot of material that didn't make the final cut in those blogs. But unfortunately, that came out at exactly the same time as MLB's very first social media policy came out. And its first social media policy, because baseball, like most sports, simply does not understand the speed with which technology works and does not understand that you can't stop it. With their first social media policy, baseball basically said nobody who is connected with Major League Baseball can comment on Major League Baseball in social media. Now, what they really wanted to say was, under your accounts, and we're going to take you to task if you do things that are detrimental to the image of the game. And it took them a couple of years to get around.
They're not going to come at you.
Yeah, and so eventually they got to where they needed to be, but the effect of it was that I had to literally take my name off of ownership of the Facebook page, take my name off ownership of the Twitter account, and not contribute to it. Which was unfortunate because by the time the book came out, Jason was working on other projects and was rarely in the press box or in the ballpark, and I was still there every day. But that's the way it worked out. And, the book's done fine anyway.
Right. Did you have fun with it? Let me ask you that.
Oh, my heavens, yes. I mean, there's one story in the book, and forgive me, I'm going to tell the story, and you're going to be quiet for about 7 minutes because it's a long story, but it's worth it. We're standing out. Our standard protocol was we would go in the first day the team was in town. We knew that they always had pitchers and catchers meetings, things like that. So we would go in, pop in before the game, go into the coach's room, and try to set up meetings for the next day. You wanted to meet on day 2 because day 3 was travel day, getaway day, or Sunday and chapel day, and things would get in the way. So you try to always set up meetings for Tuesday or Wednesday and Saturday. And so we're out there standing on the field in the Oakland Coliseum, both of us, interviewing Bob McClure, who at that time was the pitching coach for the fairly woeful Kansas City Royals. If you look in the dictionary under eccentric left-hander, all the photos are Bob McClure. All of them. So we're asking McClure for any interesting stories, and because one of the unwritten rules is that you're gonna, rookies get pranked. The Chan-Ho Park story came out there. Remember that one of the things that they do with rookies is that they make them dress strangely, and I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it was it Valdez, Ishmael Valdez, I think, cut up Park's suit. He came to the ballpark in a suit, and they cut it up so that he would be forced to go home, in the rookie clothing. And what Valdez didn't know was that the suit had been made for Park by his mother.
Oh, wow.
And, and it was a huge cultural faux pas that led to great discord in that clubhouse for a while. So we're talking about pranks, and McClure says, well, here's one for you. He said, we're playing. I'm pitching for the Brewers. We're in old Milwaukee County Stadium. And I don't know if you remember, but in old Milwaukee County Stadium, the bullpens were in the outfield. And the Brewers' bullpen was in right field. And there was a big cinder block building out in the bullpen. It was about 10 by 20. And all that was in that building was a toilet and a sink. And it was for the guys to use in the bullpen. Okay,
right.
Fine. So McClure says, we're all out having just a little too much fun on a Saturday night. And I show up for work on Sunday morning, he said, and I am just dying. So I get a copy of the Sunday paper out of the clubhouse, and I walk out to the bullpen, and I lock myself in the bathroom. He said, I have no interest in shagging flies. I have no interest in warming up. I just want to survive to game time, right?
Right.
Okay. So he says, it's getting to be late. It's maybe 15 minutes to game time. I figure, well, I better get out and go. And I go to open the door, and it won't move. And I'm throwing my weight against the door, and it won't move. He said, it's moving maybe an inch, and that's all. I can't get it to move. And I am, finally I went up and I pulled the grating off of the ventilation, and I tried to see if I could fit through there, and I couldn't. And I'm sitting here and I'm panicking. He said, it's getting to be game time, and I'm locked in the bathroom. And finally, I made this Herculean push, and I managed to get just enough space to be able to wedge a hand in and into the opening, and finally I got the thing pushed open far enough to squeeze out. He said I had abrasions all over my chest. I look like hell. I come out and I step out and I look, and there was a flagpole on top of the building. And somebody had taken the rope from the flagpole and stretched it all the way down over the doorknob and locked me in.
On purpose, yes.
And I'm thinking, okay, I got to find out who did this. But I got to be subtle about it. So he's kind of quiet, and he kind of just lets it go. Next homestand, he's out in the bullpen warming up, and this, as he described it, this old leather-lung bat who hung out in the area came over and said, "Hey, McClure, you want to know who locked you in the shitter?" And he said, "Ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about." She said, "Bullshit, I got pictures. You want them?" And he said, "What are they going to cost me?" She said, "I'm not going to be too hard on you. I just need a Robin Yount autograph, okay?" So he says, "I'll be right back." 5 minutes later, he comes back with a baseball with a Yount signature on it, and he gets the pictures. He recognizes who's in the pictures, puts them away, says, "Thank you very much, ma'am." 4 months later, teams are on a road trip, and they have an off day in Kansas City. So a bunch of the guys, including the miscreants, decide they're going to go play golf. And as Right. When ball players of the time play golf on their off day, it was 18 bottles, not 18 holes. They asked him if he wanted to go play golf. He said, no, I already have plans to do something else. He said, I'm going hunting. He said, oh, cool, okay. So he goes out. This is the following season, so it's early in the year. He goes out into the countryside in Missouri or Kansas, I'm not sure which, and he finds a spring mud piglet. In other words, he finds a baby pig that is absolutely coated in mud and whatever else is in the mud from the spring rains. He purchases this baby pig, puts him into a pillowcase, ties the pillowcase shut, brings it home to the hotel, bribes one of the maintenance people to open the room directly across the hall from his, walks into the room. This is long enough ago that players roomed together on the road. Right. Walks into the room, removes the nightstand from between the two beds, pushes the beds together, draws back the covers, stands on the bed, opens the pillowcase, and drops it.
Oh, wow.
And
the
steps
filth
out of
and
the room.
The smell
and steps out of the room. The guys get home about 2 hours. He said, I had to sit by the door for almost 3 hours waiting for them to come home. And they get home, and they are so blistered that they can't even get their key in the door for about 6 minutes. She said, it's an absolute comedy. You know, I'm watching this through the peephole. And they get the door open, and they start to walk in, and they shut the door, and they back out. And one of them says, what is it? I said, there's something in there. Are you sure? Well, I think so. Oh, man, you're pretty drunk. Let's just go in and see. And they open the door again, and they walk in, and the door closes, and nothing more is heard. The next morning, McClure can't stand it anymore. About 8:30 or 9 o'clock, he goes over and he knocks on the door to see if the guys want to go to breakfast. And they open the door and they said, Bobby, you'll never believe what happened last night. And he walks in the room, and the pig is lying in bed, eating French fries dipped in ketchup from room service, wearing a harness and a leash and sparkly clean. They found a pet shop to clean up the pig at 8 o'clock in the morning and brought it back. And the pig went on, and this is the only clue we got. He said the pig went on to enjoy a life of ease on the farm that one of those guys.
Wow. That's how they handled it.
That was it. And McClure said, we've had 3 team reunions, and nobody to this day knows who put the pig in the room. You guys can break that in your book if you can find out who the guys were. I'm not telling.
Wow.
And I went and I looked at the roster of players on that team. And one name jumped out at me immediately, and God knows why, Ralph, but 20 years earlier, I had heard this throwaway line in a broadcast that in the off season, Reggie Cleveland goes back to his family farm in Swift Current, Canada. Okay, that's where the pig went to live. Now I just have to figure out who the roommate was. So every time somebody from that Brewers team came through the Bay Area, I would set up a deal, and I was going, Robin Young. I'd say, Robin, remember the pig? I mean, I'd hit him blind with it, just right between the eyes, hoping for an instantaneous reaction. And his instantaneous reaction was, that wasn't me. I said, so you remember it? He said, oh, hell yeah, I remember it. He said, but it wasn't me. I said, well, whose room was it in? He said, well, I'm not going to tell you that. He said, I'll just tell you that one of the guys I think is still involved with Major League Baseball. All right, so that helped narrow it down a little further and a little further and a little further. And it finally got to the point where I was pretty sure I knew who it was. And this was a whole year later now. Spring training. I'm at Indian School Park in Scottsdale, walking the backfields looking for a particular person. And I find him standing behind the backstop watching an intra-squad game. And minor league camp's pretty loose, right? Pretty informal. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of wander over to the backstop, and I'm standing there for about 5 minutes. Didn't say a word, just watching the game. And then I kind of start to walk away, and I walk right behind the guy. Don't introduce myself. Don't say a word. I just say, do you want to know who put the pig in your room? He turns around and he says, yep. And this guy had a reputation for being one of the nastiest, toughest competitors in baseball. He was a pitcher, left-hander, for the Giants,
with the Brewers,
the Padres, with the Brewers, with the Giants, with the Padres. I think he pitched for the Yankees. When he came to the Brewers,
Tidrow?
Nope. When he came to the Brewers, he sat down with the team, and this is one of the greatest explications of the unwritten rules in one sentence that I've ever heard in my life. First day of spring training with a new team, he sat down and he looked at all the way around the clubhouse and he said, I have exactly 24 friends in Major League Baseball. And if I'm not on this team next year, not one of you motherfuckers is among them.
Uh-huh.
In other words, I'll go to war with you, but I'll go to war against you if I have to.
Right. That's probably why. Is there an unwritten rule that pitchers don't really befriend hitters and vice versa?
Bill White traded Bob Gibson's best friend. Gibby's parting shot to him, don't you fucking dare lean out over the plate and try and hit my slider.
That answers that question, yes.
Together on the All-Star team, they're riding up the elevator. Gibson doesn't speak to Bill White. Bill says, Gibby, for Christ's sake, I'm your best friend. Gibson looked at him and said, today, tomorrow I might have to hurt you.
Whoa.
Now, talk about throwing at guys for running. How many people did Sandy Koufax hit in his career?
I don't remember him having to hit anybody, actually.
He hit one player.
Really?
Hit one player who stole third base with a 4-run lead in the 9th inning.
Whoa. Breaking
He
the
hit that
rule.
Hit that player in the shoulder blade and broke it.
Whoa.
Was terrified to throw inside the rest of his career. Never.
Was it Jim Ray Hart?
No, it was Lou Brock.
Ooh. Holy Toledo.
So yeah, there's just a raft of stories in there that even the greatest baseball fans of all time will learn something from there. They'll learn why Mickey Mantle was clapping like a fool when Willie Mays struck out in the All-Star game at Candlestick Park.
I remember that story from the book. It was a Horace Stoneham thing. They bet some golf equipment, or they signed some golf equipment.
Horace
Mantle
comped them
fought
to a round at the Olympic Club, and they offered to pay, and Horace said, double or nothing. If you owe me twice as much if Willie gets a hit tomorrow, and nothing if Willie strikes out in the first inning. Because it was Mickey and Whitey who went out together to play golf, and it was Whitey on the mound.
And Whitey had something on his wedding ring where he'd cut into the ball and doctor it up. Yeah,
although that wasn't how it most often got done. Yogi had a buckle on his right
shin guard. Yeah.
Shin guard that was sharpened. There's a buckle on there anyway. There's a tongue on the buckle, and he sharpened that. And you could take a ball that was kind of in the dirt and just, as you're picking it up, just rub it against the buckle before you finish the throwing motion.
Right. Oh yeah, that doctoring has gone on a long time. Kind of funny, when they changed the rule, they grandfathered some players in, as if other players weren't going to learn the technique from these guys and carry it on. Sometimes the lawmakers in baseball, the powers that be, I don't know where they come from. I don't understand their thinking, or lack thereof.
Well, I still work for the league, so
that's true. That's true. There's
things that I can't say.
Yeah. I'm sure it's like any other workforce. You go to work, there are things on a daily basis that come up that you must go, wow, why is this the way it is? But would you do anything else in life? And I'm going to ask you, what would your passion be if it wasn't baseball?
Probably the other thing that I do, which is acting.
Okay.
Acting in movies. I mean, I'm not particularly good at it, but I enjoy it, and I enjoy and who's to say I might not have been good at it had I studied it, but I enjoy the process, and I love movies, and I serve as a host for one of the venues at the Napa Valley Film Festival, and it's a never-ending source of pride to me that after we have an audience discussion, I have filmmakers. We're literally at the end of the festival circuit. We're in mid-November, and the award season begins. I think there's one more festival after us. So these filmmakers have been to everything already. And when they come up and tell you, you asked questions that nobody has asked on this whole tour, or you got at the point of the film better than anybody else did, that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling to know that you're able to sit and give the audience something of value. They're paying more to go see that movie at the festival than they would in a movie theater, and the reason is that they get to interact with the filmmakers afterwards.
Michael, I just flashed on the perfect guest in the future for us, and that would be John Lowendakas. I don't pronounce his name particularly well, but he's done a number of documentaries about the Giants. One of them was the 1989 World Series with the earthquake, and he just happened to be there with his camera, and I'm sure he's a friend of yours.
It would be a pleasure to chat with John.
I will set that up. He's been on these airwaves, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network airwaves before. As a matter of fact, he he brought as a guest. My God, I can't think of him. One of my idols as a kid. He wrote for Sport, and he wrote A Day in the Bleachers, Arnold Hano, well over 90. And he brought Arnold to these airwaves, and that was one of my thrills as an interviewer. Wow. So let's...
As well it should be. So you remember that iconic photograph?
Of him, of Willie going...
The great photograph of Willie making the catch. And
kind of do.
And in recent years... Well, in recent years, a color version of that photograph has surfaced. It's a little bit wider angle, in which you can see someone leaning out of the window closest to left field in the offices above the deep inset at the Polo Grounds.
Yes.
Do you know who that was?
Joe Garagiola.
That is correct.
Not bad, huh,
correct.
for an old guy. Who was purchased by the Giants after September. So he played a number of games down the stretch as a catcher and really boosted that catching staff. The very weak-hitting Western Ray Cott catching staff, and was ineligible for the series and had to sit up there and watch it from Could you imagine the thrill of that? Willie facing him and running at an angle that no one has ever seen. No one has seen the expression on Willie's face while running. He claims that he knew he was going to make that catch, that it was no problem, that he was...
I believe him.
I believe him, too.
I believe him. I mean, Willie is a direct descendant and disciple of the Dizzy Dean school of thought, which is, it ain't bragging if you do it. Right.
Just off the subject and on the subject, when I'm trying to think of the Giant announcer. Hank Greenwald was the announcer. He and Willie recorded pregame shows, and I'm wondering what happened to those tapes. It was all year round. It was all year, and they'd spend maybe 5 minutes together before the game and talk. And I thought it was gold, and it was never heard it published, never transcribed into a book, but wow, those were great. I wonder if someone, a man in your position with some inside pull, could try to get in touch with those tapes. Just
consider it done. For the better part of a dozen years, until Fresno became a Houston affiliate, Hank's son Doug was my spring training roommate. So I have a little bit of an in there. A little bit.
A little bit indeed. He's someone that I'd love for you to bring on this show as well.
Well, if we bring Doug on the show, you and I won't have to work.
Well, I'd just like to shut my mouth once in a while. You'd work. You and he can go back and forth and talk stories. And I covered Fresno when they were an A team with for Tops, and the general manager was a guy by the name of Bill Thompson, who was
a broadcaster originally.
He was third guy in the booth at one time with Lon and Russ.
And he was replaced by who as the third guy?
Bill King.
Yep.
I know. Wow.
Bill King.
Good guess. I didn't know who had come first. If Bill King was first. Wow. And you know who produced those shows, those giant broadcasts, were
Franklin Muley.
Wow, you know it all, Michael. This is
well, I'm old. I'm old, and I have not filled my brain with any new information in probably 20 years.
We're both on the same track. You know, except that you have kept up with the game as a maven. Most people that are old and whom I talk to, and I consider old to be a privilege. I think it's terrific if you can be old and keep.
Well,
those
we sure
memories.
as hell have earned it. We've
Absolutely.
earned old,
And it sure as hell beats the alternative. Let's put it that way.
Yes, it does.
All right, so let's keep above ground for another week, and we'll come back next week and do the same.
Well, I'll part with a quote from the great Eric Davis, who finished his career with the San Francisco Giants, rarely playing, and yet always had the biggest smile in the ballpark. Always. And finally, one day in September, I went up to him and I said, E, you're looking at the end of your career. You know, you've been through all this stuff with the stomach cancer and the ruptured spleen and all of that. How can you be so cheerful every day? And he looked at me and he said, every day that I wake up on this side of the lawn is the best fucking day of my life.
Very well.
And if we all think that way,
and he had in his life he had to put up with all those things that you mentioned, plus Maud Schott.
Well, there's that. Yeah.
And it's nice to know that he kept his disposition. Let's put it that way. After all of those things,
he was one of the. I mean, he was one of the guys who, when I got to meet him, pleasantly surprised me. I was not expecting from him what I got. Reggie Sanders is another one. Two guys who turned out to be absolutely, if you can use this term, adorable. They were just the sweetest guys in the world, and they had time for you whenever you wanted it. And, you know, there's just, I cannot say enough nice things about both of them.
Well, I don't know much about Reggie Sanders, but I'll always think differently of Eric Davis now that you said that, because disposition is so important. These are not robots. They're not statistical machines. These are human beings who have to go through life, and how you go through life and what you spread, the cheer you spread or don't spread, is very, very important, and that's how you should be remembered, not by your stats. So,
well, people have always asked me, you know, why do you think so highly of baseball players? Why do you revere these guys? You know, they're just athletes. And I tell them, well, look, let's think about it this way: if you where getting the right answer 30% of the time made you a superstar, where thousands of people watched you work and commented on it every day, and where your career ended when you're 35, wouldn't you be kind of special?
Right.
I mean,
and the prep to get up, the 7-10 years that you spend preparing, honing your skills to become a world-class athlete, and from the time, sometimes from Little League, when some of these players know that Major League Baseball is ahead of them in their Little League days. So their whole jobs start when they're 12 years old. It's not like they have to be passionate. What you admire about them is their passion, and can't be said it's a little boy's game played by men. And you admire the little boy in them that it takes, I'm sure.
You do, and you also you have to kind of sit back and, I mean, to me, this has fascinated me since college. When I was in college, my dean of students was Will Smith, who was an All-American tackle for Michigan, and then went on to play for the Raiders and was close friends of Ed McGaugh, and was, there with Ed when the coup was pulled off and Al Davis basically usurped the team to himself. And I seriously talked to Will about us starting an institute for athletes who are approaching retirement, because retirement from professional sports is like death. You have to go through all the stages of grief in order to survive it. And when you're just at the age that everybody else is getting traction in their chosen career, you're done. Now what? It's certainly not one of our most pressing social problems by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an interesting one.
Right, and the money is notwithstanding. It's your ego.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, money with no purpose is just a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Right. It's just the idle tools, and you start getting into things that you wouldn't get into, and ways to spend your money, and makes a different person out of you. Michael, this is terrific. We'll come back next week and do it again.
All right. You and I will never have to worry about having idle money.
Well, me. No, idle money. Any money, for crying out loud. A little idle money was just a dream. All right.
See you next week.
Almost next Wednesday when the Social Security check hits. So say no money, ha.
There you go.
And laugh. Thank you, Michael. Great show. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, Giants Baseball, past, present, future. If you like any of our offerings out there, please do me the solid of accumulating some lightly used children's books, putting them in cartons, and taking them down to the Head Start program in whatever city, town, metropolis you live in. Those books can get kids on the right track. You get them reading, you get them school ready, and if you did that, you'd be my hero. If you don't do that, my hero will continue to be Michael Duca. Thanks again, Michael. We'll talk to you soon. Adios, everybody.